had the two best coaches to work with, Alex and Jose. Culture is the hardest thing to build. Alex did better than anybody else I've seen. And to that point, completely ruthless. David, it's over. And we're asking you to look at joining Real Madrid, a special one. He then went 2 years with us without losing a game at home. Nobody had done that. It ended early, right? That's the reality. Josie said, Pete, get me out of here, will you?
Your current role, Atlassian and Williams. You're on record as saying that this is going to be one of the biggest comebacks in sporting history.
I think it is. And why do I believe that is...
Never fear a storm.
Be ready to adapt.
The skill is staying true to ourselves.
You've spoken about this holy trilogy, that triangle between the owner, the chief exec and the manager being at the heart of successful cultures.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit more.
Good business practices, if you apply those to sport, you're more successful. That's the reality. And I think that's because there's a lot of sports businesses are undermanaged.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because traditionally sport's been full of fans doing jobs. And in football, that certainly was, you got them cheaper because they were a fan.
Yeah.
Okay? So I think building business principles in sport is certainly what's helped me make those things more successful.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental problem. The second thing is there is no substitute. Whatever is happening in the world today, there's no substitute for good people.
Right. And what do you mean by good people?
I mean people who are their skill set. So not everybody can do everything. So building an organisation, building a team, I guess is what it comes back to. And again, I think sport amplifies that more than anything. So, because it builds trust, right? You get somebody passing a ball into a space because they expect one of their colleagues to know them well enough to be on it. Having a left-back's got a different skill than a centre-forward. So you select the individual based on his skill, but there's lots of those. So why makes one team more successful than the other? It's teamwork, it's collaboration, it's belief, and it's building this trust. And that's a people dynamic. So again, I think there's a lot of people think that these things can be automatic. So we spend all our time on processes and tech and forget the people element. Quality people and understanding what you need and then bringing it together it is the key to success irrespective of the business.
So tell us about how that would work though in the boardroom.
One of the first jobs moving into United was there's a fundamental shift in its ownership because you started as a PLC, it was somebody else's money.
Right.
It wasn't your money, it wasn't a few shareholders' money, it was very public and therefore, we're talking 96 now, governance was an important factor, right?
Yeah.
Football's a very different environment than it was then. And I don't know if you remember, but there was several clubs who'd gone public. And they went public for liquidity reasons, just to give their shareholders some cash back. That's great. United was the only one that sort of ran it as a PLC with governance, with understanding, not get liquidity and then just do what you were doing.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a fundamental sea change in United in 96 post going public. We had to build the right governance structure.
Right.
We have to have the right reporting structures because it was someone else's money.
But where did that different approach come from, Peter? Who drove that?
So that was initially driven by Roland Smith.
Right.
So Roland was chairman. Roland was a big industrialist. He was chairman of HSBC, professor of marketing at Manchester University, a big character.
Yeah.
Right, a big character. But he understood what good looked like. He understood what needed to happen as a PLC business. I think he was instrumental in taking it public to the benefit of the private shareholders and fundamentally to the benefit of United.
Yeah.
Because I think you got to look back at these things that the Premier League started. First TV money's come in with Murdoch, and he bet the farm that Sky was going to win over quite a competitive set.
Yeah.
And, I remember talking to him and he was really explicit. Sky was going to be successful based around sport and entertainment. And off sports, football was going to be it. And, I think he transformed the sport of football by the way he produced it. Pre-Sky, there was 4 cameras, right? And most of the time it's following the ball, not the goal. So the production qualities that came in, and all those dynamics came together, which I think is another interesting thing, is you look at the industry, you look at the trajectory, and then it's how you differentiate yourself against whoever else is in that industry. So I think football started to grow. World Cups in football are just a phenomenal dynamic of growing the sport every 4 years. That's what the World Cups and then European Cup has all been about. These moments in time that just have this massive, continued new fan base being brought in. So those things, those things around going public fundamentally was the driver of us. People didn't like it, but it was an important piece that made United really global, really successful. Was about applying a business structure to this wonderful thing called Manchester United.
But then tell us about this trilogy, the three main characters that then took all those ingredients and helped them be successful both on and off the pitch.
So that was sort of division of labour, if you like. The entity that was in charge of the cash and the responsibility for shareholder returns or value. That was invariably the board, or in Chelsea's case, the owner. The skill set between the CEO, who at that point I was responsible for putting the plan together, delivering the plan, and again giving the right returns to the investors group. And then the coach, and again, pre '96, the sort of coach did everything, did the contracts for the players, decided the salary, decided which hotel would go on, what time train they took, right? The sport was going to become much, much bigger than that. So we had to divide those responsibilities, and that's what we did. And the whole of Trinity that Jose talks about, which was him, me, and Roman. That's how we ran the business, and that was that you need the money, so we had to satisfy the owner that we were doing the right things. We needed to build the best team in Europe. That was the objective, and you can't do that without the coach, who ultimately can make a good player great or a good player not so great. So he's got to be completely on board. And it's that division of skill sets brought together where you really optimise the results.
So what was the difference then? Say, if we compare and contrast the Chelsea experience of you just had one man to satisfy in the ownership of Abramovich, whereas Manchester United, you've got a board that you're answering to.
I mean, in theory, it's the same thing. I guess what we had to do in United was very much put the structure in. Change the structure from, a Martin and an Alex into a more formal board whose shareholders were, at that point, pension schemes or whatever. Right. Not that interested in going to the game. It was an investment, and then changing that and really supporting Alex to be what he's really, really good at and take all the other functions away. So, for instance, when I walked in United, didn't have a full-time doctor. As successful as we were, we had, no state-of-the-art training ground. Carrington came 98. We had the Cliff, which was one inside, one outside training pitch. Now, phenomenal, but that wasn't future-proofing United against the growth of the sport. So getting full-time medical staff, getting a marketing department, getting a commercial department, starting to align skill sets to the job that really needed doing to make United a global football brand went way beyond what it was in 95, 96.
But I'm intrigued about the relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson and you in that time. Like, he's been on record as talking about where Martin Edwards sent him a letter suggesting he'd taken his eye off the ball in '97, and he was upset and piqued by it. You know, there was the occasion where he was going to threaten to not lead the team out at Wembley because of a pay dispute. You were having to mediate. You were the third wheel in that.
Look, it's tough, right? Alex is one of the best. There's no doubt about it. If I sort of lean into the football years, I had the two best coaches to work with.
Yeah.
Alex and Jose. Very different, which is what you also find. Very different characters, very different ways of going about it. But in terms of real management and leadership, incredible.
So let's answer it in terms of what did they have in common, those two?
What they had in common was the ability to take people with them.
And how would they do that?
In different ways, right?
Give us some examples.
So Alex would, if you lost, right, and you came back on the coach, he'd have the ability of taking people down to the depths. Like, there was nobody smiling, there was nobody talking. Right. They were all waiting for him to crack. And then probably by about Knutsford, if you came from London, he'd decide that there was a Champions League game on Tuesday, so he better get these boys back up.
And how would he do that?
So, he'd do it either by whistling, right? Or he'd walk down the bus and clip Scholes' ear. Something to break it up in a way that, right? And they knew they'd suffered enough then, and they better be back in with the right headspace to win on Tuesday.
Right.
Yeah. So, his own unique way of doing things, okay. But, and if you wrap all that up, his ability to sell United.
Go on, what do you mean by that?
And by that, I mean, you didn't come to United for the most money, ever. If you wanted the most money, we'd just close the book and say, go to where you want to go to. All right, you're here.
Like
the culture of United was tangible. Right?
So was there anyone that you did close the book on?
Yes, for sure.
Go on, give us some names.
Less about the money, but more about the overall environment was Ronaldinho. Where, as great a player he was, he would have joined us and probably disrupted the what United was, which was fundamental, a team. Yeah.
Yeah.
The whole process around David being moved out was, again, David had done this incredible job. To the outside world, was still on his way up.
Yeah.
To Alex, we'd had the best. Okay.
And what had he seen that would indicate that?
I think one of the things that Alex did better than anybody else I've seen is understand what United needed to be as a team. And to that point, completely ruthless to that individual.
Because there's a story, like Bobby Charlton tells it in his book, that he'd spotted that when Beckham scored a goal, he was running away from his teammates and not towards them because he believed it made a better shot of him on the back page of the paper.
Yeah, I read that. And there was this thought that, what David was doing was dropping back, not being as attacking. And therefore, again, in Alex's view, we'd had the best of him. There was a lot of noise around at that time as well with, David and where he was going in life.
Yeah.
And that didn't sit well with what United was. A United player was 100% focused on United.
Right.
No distractions, right? Not allowed type stuff. And the world of football was changing.
But can I ask you about that? Because you're in that position there where you've got the biggest commercial footballer on the planet, and you've got a coach saying to you, no, he's not. He's like, we've had the best out of him. How do you mediate in a situation like that?
First of all, he's a better he's better at managing a team than I am. Football team.
Right.
Okay. His view on the players is what's important, not my view on the players. And it's understanding those two very different roles. So when I got the call about that, my answer to him is, are you sure? What you can't do is fall out. You can't, throw your toy in the corner and not play him. All right? So you've got to play the game because it's David Beckham. We've got to create a market.
Okay.
And financially, we're not going to take a reduction on him because you're not happy with him.
So how far out?
So we've got to work. We've got to work together on this.
Yeah.
If you want, didn't matter whether it's David or anybody else. It was that close relationship in terms of we wanted to give Alex the team that could win the league, the cup, the European Cup every year.
Yeah.
Right. And as I say, he had to be a critical part of that. So it didn't really matter. I mean, that's not to say he wasn't challenged.
Yeah,
and that's not sure we can do that this year. You might have to do that. But he was always involved in every player. He was always a critical component in getting a player to come to us because he sold the club better than anybody else.
Yeah.
He was brilliant with the people around the player. He was incredibly honest, like nobody gets a guarantee that you're going to play here. We're giving the opportunity to play here type approach, right?
Can you give us an example of who we would have had that conversation with?
Ronaldo at 17.
Right.
And in fact, that was probably the one exception that I was aware of where we'd been out in the US. Our final game coming back from a pre-season was in Portugal to open up the stadium.
Yeah.
I'd done a deal with the club that we would take him. But he was
before the game?
The weeks before.
All right, yeah.
And this was part of the agreement that we would go to their stadium, open it up pre-Portugal. And he could stay there for 12 months because that was probably the best way of developing him.
Right.
Half-time we get a call. I mean, he run riot with us. Okay, now it's pre-season and everybody's been away for 3 weeks, but he's still run riot. And you never get a call from anybody at half-time apart from this time. And it was like, we've got to take this boy back with us.
This was Alex phoning you?
Yeah, and walked in the dressing room and it's Keane and Giggsy saying, this guy's ripping us apart. I mean, we can't leave him here type stuff. And actually that was the one exception in all where I stayed and renegotiated the deal.
Right.
And part of that renegotiation was he would get some games in his first season. Now he finished up playing more than those games on merit.
Yeah.
But that was a sort of he saw the potential of what he could be at United.
Right.
And again, I mean, the development of him during that period of time was history, right? And that's where Alex was, brilliant in terms of he was tough, he was stubborn at times, but he was always pragmatic. And he was ruthless. Right, he was ruthless. Right, he.
What's the most ruthless decision you've ever seen him make?
I think he's made several. Right, I mean, some posts I met when Keane went. Right,
yeah.
Keane would have walked through a wall, and then once you've done your job, it's on to the next one. But David was ruthless. David did not want to play for anybody else but Manchester United. Genuinely, he loved the club. It had been part of his life. It was everything a part of his life. So to get David to move was not about moving for more money. He didn't want to go. And it was basically confronting David with, David, look, you're not going to play for Manchester United again. That's the reality. And that was a decision that was taken fundamentally by Alex, supported by the board completely.
Yeah.
And that was one of the ways that United worked best, because once the decision had been taken, it was a joint decision that just then got executed.
But how do you prepare yourself to have a conversation like that? Because you're wielding the axe. How do you prepare?
Honesty. I think you've got to be truthful. It took a decision that, look, the final call I had was one Sunday afternoon. I was barbecuing, they were barbecuing in London, and it was like, David, it's over. And we're asking you to look at joining Real Madrid, not Bolton, right? I mean, I know the Madrid guys inside out. I said, the only team that I think you can go to leaving Manchester United is Madrid, if I'm being honest. You'll be well looked after. You'll be playing with superstars. You'll be in for trophies, and they'll pay you more than we are. I mean, I'm not being funny, but more importantly than that, it's over here.
And what was his reaction?
Tough, right? Because he didn't want to leave. And I think it's that honesty. I think it's confronting difficult situations in a way that is respectful and honest and open. And I think, the big teams, the high-performing teams, are honest with each other.
Yeah.
They're tough. It's a tough environment, right? And everybody's calling everybody else out. It's not just the senior management with employees.
Yeah.
Employees calling employees out. Whilst there isn't and has to be a structure, it's really fluid when it comes to solving problems.
Yeah.
It's like collective problem solving. And it's not all top down by any stretch. It's everywhere in the business, I think, really saying, if we're going to win, and sport is pretty brutal at determining whether you win or lose.
Yeah.
Once or twice a week, right? It's not the stock market every quarter or whatever. This is, and sport means something to people. That's the other big difference.
When you find something that just fits right into your routine and you think, why was I not doing this sooner? Well, that's how I felt when I first came across the Bond Charge infrared sauna blanket. Now, if you follow me on my socials, I'm a pretty big fan of saunas. But I also know that sometimes they're just not the most accessible things. I mean, I travel a lot, for example. The infrared sauna blanket, though, well, for me, it solves that problem. I mean, it heats up in under a minute. It can be used on your sofa or wherever you relax. You can take it with you if you're traveling. I love the fact that it uses an infrared heat to target your body directly. So there's no sweating buckets. There's no discomfort. It's this lovely sort of smooth, effective way to burn calories, to detox, to relax. And Bond Charge have built a loyal following of over 250,000 happy customers, including me. And when you're talking about something that gets those kinds of results, I think it's important to listen. So if you're looking for a way to make your recovery easier, a bit less of a chore, then maybe check out Bond Charge. Head to bondcharge.com and use the code HP15 to save 15%. That's the code HP15 for 15% off at bondcharge.com. Trust me, it's worth a look. There was a point a little while ago where I looked at all the supplements in my kitchen cupboard, and my wife laughs about this even now, and she's like, what has happened here? And honestly, I didn't realise that all of the supplements that I was taking had got so complicated. But I think it's because I was trying to be a dad, trying to be a partner to Harriet, trying to run a couple of businesses, trying to find time to host this podcast. And I suppose really what I needed was less things in my life and just a few things that actually work. And I think there's a myth that I'd like to debunk at this point, right? It's that high performance doesn't mean trying to chase everything. It doesn't mean finding every hack. It doesn't mean squeezing more into every single day. Sometimes the best performers, and they've told us this when they've been in this studio, they just prioritize simplicity. They only master the fundamentals. And to be honest, I think I've learned this the hard way through trial and error. And I think I now realize that nothing is more fundamental than fueling your body with the right nutrition. And I believe this helps. Vitals by Heights is nutrition without the noise. Just 2 capsules, 6 seconds, 0 effort. And in here, all the essential nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the healthy fats that are designed to power energy, focus, recovery, and sleep. So we're talking about no mixing, no nonsense, just everything you need in the right doses. And I think if something takes longer than about 10 seconds, I'm out. Luckily, this takes about 6, so you're fine. So why don't you strip your health routine back and just focus on what matters? Head to heights.com/Jake or enter code HP20 at checkout for 20% off your first month. I promise you, I believe this stuff really works.
What's the most brutal bit of feedback that you ever gave to Alex then?
There's always a tension, right? And I think you've got to make sure it's a healthy tension.
Right.
Because you don't see eye to eye all the time. And there are times where you say, look, we can't do that. Which sometimes means you can't do that. Okay? And Alex is not a person who doesn't like not doing what he wants to do.
Yep.
Yeah? So that's very different walking into that environment than the previous 10 years where I ran a business, which is effectively, my business that we were building into a global brand.
Yeah.
This is one of the most respected guys who, I had to manage him, right? And he was much more powerful than I was.
Yeah. So give us some tips on how did you manage him?
Well, again, I think it's like, I'm not going to try and do your job, right? You're here to do this. And we better be honest about that. And I'm here to do this. And if we get that right, you'll be more successful. I'll make you more successful. You'll earn more money. We'll win more trophies. It's whatever the mechanisms are. But we've both got a part to play. And I guarantee if this role's not here or I'm not here, you'll be less successful, right? And joined in 96, left in 2004, and I think it was a pretty successful period.
Just a bit.
Okay. I took the business private, away from the public market, because it was the right thing to do for Manchester United. We brought the Irish in, who were good owners. And during that period of time, we built Carrington, which was first of its kind. We extended Old Trafford. So it didn't have leaky roofs and all those types of things. We gave in the money and the armoury to build 3 teams in that period. Yeah. And he was critical to that success. But we always provided the sort of money and environment to achieve it. And I think that's a good example. It's success in the sports or a business is never down to one person.
Yeah.
It's this collective top talent that come together, which is like a DNA. It's not, the best doesn't mean that you're best collectively.
Yeah. Were you ever concerned? You mentioned the Irish coming in, the Coolmore, the McManus and Magnier. Were you ever concerned about the personal friendship that Ferguson had with them and because of what happened subsequently when they fell out?
Well, it developed. I mean, it wasn't part of the decision-making as to getting them versus somebody else. It was the right thing to bring new ownership in.
Right.
And I think overall that they were good owners for that period of time.
Yeah.
And I think ownership is such a critical part of whether a team's successful or not. So I think they were a real contributor to the success of United in that period.
Right.
I really do. Because they let the management get on with it. I was CEO. Alex remained the manager.
But were you concerned about your role in that?
I think, not at all.
Because obviously we talk about this trilogy.
Yeah, not at all.
No.
Not at all. Because they bought into it on the basis. It was a business decision for them to do that.
Right.
Not that they were friends of Alex's. I mean, they were really smart people. Okay? Yeah. They were businessmen who loved sport and loved what they do in horse racing. So, there was some relationship there, but it did not colour one iota in terms of, they weren't involved in the day-to-day running of the business. They wanted the business to be successful. Right. They wanted to, the business to be worth more when they sold it than when they bought it.
Yeah.
And we delivered on that. So I wasn't concerned about that. What was concerning was the fallout between them. And, that wasn't a great time. And, there's some tough conversations that I had to go on about that.
Would you?
Well, because look, I mean, it's like everything else. The brand of Manchester United is worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, talk about IP value. And therefore the way that our employees, and that's not just the people who take the tickets. Alex is an employee.
Yeah.
Right? He had to understand that these are important. These are investors in the club. The way we don't do those types of things that brings into disrepute either with a fan base or investors or things like that. So yeah, it caused some reasons for, you've got to confront these things and deal with them. And it got resolved in the end, right? As it always would do. But I think what you learn from that is sport matters to so many people.
Yep.
Right? It sells newspapers, front, middle, and back. Right? So you've got to understand that if you're operating in sport, you've got more visibility.
But do you feel that, because we talk about the Rock of Gibraltar dispute between the Coolmore and Sir Alex Ferguson, did you feel that Sir Alex in that case sort of misrepresented or misunderstood that he was an employee here, because that had the potential to bring Manchester United into disrepute?
Yeah, and I think this is where things get blurred, don't they?
Yeah.
Because we're naive if we think that sports businesses are just like normal businesses. They're not. Okay. So understanding that environment, understanding that there are things you would do in a normal business that you'd never do in a sports business because of the visibility. You've got to be hypersensitive to it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if I go back to that period, if we did one little thing, it was everywhere. We had our shares frozen, 2 times because we made an announcement which the Mail said, we went before the phone, and the way we presented it, the Mail said, United will be doing its own TV and showing its own games. Share price will go up. Next minute, share price, frozen. Right. What are you doing? So we had to, so it was not that we'd done anything wrong. It was just the way it was portrayed in the newspapers. So you live in an environment like a fishbowl, and that does have an impact. That does mean you've got to be hypersensitive. That does mean got a little problem, it gets exploded. So you're constantly, I think we were constantly, we were the hottest ticket in town.
Yeah.
Right? Which was great for so many things, and periods where it wasn't that great and you had to deal with it.
Yeah. But that dispute opened the door to the Glazers that bought a small stake and increased it at that time. Yeah,
I think unfortunately what it did, I think inadvertently that probably brought the Irish tenure to an earlier end than it could have done, right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not linking one to the other. That would be unfair to do. But that did lead ultimately to Irish selling on for the right reasons. They made a decent return on their investment and brought in the Glazers. I'd left by then, so.
No, I want to move on to the next trilogy that you became a part of with Roman Abramovich and Jose Mourinho.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, about those two relationships.
So the first one was with Roman, never been to a football game, came to quarterfinal Real Madrid at Old Trafford.
The 4-3.
Yeah, which is probably one of the best football games ever. It was a typical Wednesday night Champions League, Real Madrid. Like, you could have, if he had 160,000 seats, you'd have sold it.
Yeah. And
he comes, his first ever football game. Didn't know who he really was. I mean, it's quite interesting. I think he was the 5th richest man, and this guy turns up and he was nice. He was polite. watched the game. After the game, came over and thanked us very much for letting him come in. Best night of his life. Right. You know, first hurdle was he wasn't wearing a shirt and tie. He was wearing jeans and a jacket. Getting him in the boardroom was a bit, you know, tasty. Anyway, we overcame that. And that was fine.
How do you overcome that? Like, how do you tell the 50th richest man in the world that he's not so smart enough?
We let him in. It was more selling it to my other directors. I think, and as I say, I think that started the romance of him wanting to get into football.
Okay.
Yeah, genuinely. He said, "This is the best night of my life. I've never seen anything like this."
Wow. So was he interested in buying Manchester United?
No, I don't. No, that was never the approach.
Right.
That was never the approach. And over I don't know, 3 or 4 months, I had dinner with him a couple of times. I mean, literally talking about football.
Right.
Like, who owns it? Well, you know, not everything's owned. You know, FIFA, UEFA, Premier League type stuff. How's it run? First time was very generic, like, how does this thing run? Second one, clearly another level of understanding. And then sort of third one was, I got a call one night and he said, I just want to let you know that I'm buying Chelsea in the morning, which was literally the week before it was probably going to go into administration.
Right.
Mm. And he said, next time you're in London, can we have dinner? Right. Which I did. And then he said, you know, look, I don't run my businesses. I've looked around. I think you're the best. Come and join me. I want you to come and set it up for me. You know, and it was, it was interesting because people don't leave United.
Yeah.
Right.
But you've been there at 68. You're a boyhood United fan.
Yeah, and the truth is, if you're going to run the business properly, you can't always be a fan.
Yeah.
You've got to be objective. You've got to be doing things that is not about fandom. It's about running it as a business.
And did you ever lose that?
No.
Like being a fan at United?
No, I think anybody who's involved in the day-to-day running of a sports team, it's different. You're not there as a fan, right? Yeah. You know, when the whistle goes, there's the whole raft of other things you have to deal with. Sure. You can't go to the pub and talk about the game.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I think, I won't say you enjoy it less. You see it through a different lens, if I'm being honest. And you need to, I think. I think really being objective is a critical part of success.
Yeah.
All right? I honestly believe that. And I think that's one of the things that you've got to inject in the management. You're here to, you're the best marketeer, right? Don't get coloured by, you know, the product.
Yeah.
We're really lucky because we see the product that other people pay for, we go and watch it. We see you know, these people that people would queue hours for to meet, we sat down in the canteen with them.
Yeah.
Right? Never take it for granted, but never become a fanboy, right?
So tell me about you decide that. So Abramovich is seducing you, he's telling you that you're the best in the business.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and he basically, it was about, you know, he doesn't run his businesses, so he wants the right people to run his businesses.
Right.
I mean, my point of view was, and I genuinely wasn't looking, but I guess looking back, what I really enjoy is building, not maintaining.
Right.
And it sounds silly that you could be maintaining a Manchester United. I don't mean it in that sense, but you know, when I decided to leave, the board said, you know, who should take over, and I said David. You know, David Gill's brilliant. You know, he'd been number 2. He joined United before I did.
Yep.
He understood the club, and the club. It wasn't that build that we did over that 8-year period. It was a different type of role.
Yeah.
And David was there, 15 years after me, right? So what attracted me about that was not, I hadn't fallen out with United. Didn't believe in it. It was this opportunity of taking the football club in the Premier League, in London, with a billionaire that had the resources to do what you needed to do. And a lot of that was understanding what he wanted to achieve, right? And it not being a hobby. And then in 2 years' time, he was bored.
So what were the kind of questions you were asking him then before you decided to sign on?
So I think the strength of any business is, what are you in it for? What are the real objectives? Setting a real North Star.
And what was his answer to that?
So he said, I wanted to be the best club in Europe. And I said, that's fine. I said, so 2 things I'm going to tell you. That's time and money.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really important to understand. And so I don't want you thinking that this can be done in a year or 2 years because you've got all the money. Right? We haven't got the people. We haven't got the facilities. We haven't got a strategy. We've got some good players. That gets you nowhere, fundamentally.
Yeah.
And so I think I tested him on his commitment. Right? I wasn't going to leave United where I could be there for 15 years to move into something that you could be there for 3 months. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And there's a solitary lesson for me in that, and that is, if you're going to join somewhere, look at the ownership group.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are the guiding light of principles in terms of their objectives, their longevity, their values. They all might be good, but they might be wanting to do it in a way that doesn't fit you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did spend quite a bit of time. And I said, okay, I'm going to take those 2 things, which is become best club in Europe and time, and play it back to you in terms of what I believe it needs doing. So I went back with him with a 5-year play, right? Because that's what I believed it would take.
Right.
And a number. And his first reaction is, I don't want to wait 5 years for success. I said, no. To be the best club in Europe, you have to become the best club in England.
Yeah.
And then you qualify to be Europe, and that's what it is. And I mean, I think the immortal advice he gave me, which I think I use a lot because I think it's relevant, particularly in sport, is after much deliberation, he said, okay, I understand that we need to build this and the sort of staging blocks. I understand the money, which was not insignificant. So if I give you that money, let's be successful, because then I look smart. If I spend that money and I'm not successful, I look stupid, and don't make me look stupid.
Right.
And I think there's a lesson for any investor in sport or any CEO who's working in sport. That's great advice. That's great advice. Because investors don't want to look stupid.
When did you last check in with your health? Not because something was wrong, but just to understand where you're at. We've spoken to some of the leading experts in health on high performance, and something that I hear time and time again is that when it comes to your health, you need to be proactive, not reactive. That's why I'm so proud to have partnered with Randox Health. I actually recently used their Everyman Health Assessment, designed specifically for men, and it looks at up to 150 different data points, things like your hormones, your liver, your kidney function, your prostate health, your heart health. And it gives you this really useful, clear picture of how your body's really doing. It also helps to spot imbalances in your body early on. I also love the fact they offer repeat testing after 6 months, so you can get a really good idea of how your health is tracking over time. And if, like me, you're short on time, you also don't need a GP referral. You don't need to wait days to get your results. You can just simply go online, book an appointment, visit a clinic near you, and get your test results within 2 hours of your sample reaching the lab. You can save 20% on all health checks with the code HP20 at randoxhealth.com. That's code HP20 for 20% off at randoxhealth.com. Huge thanks to Owen Mitchell for partnering with us on today's episode. You know, on this show, we talk so often about defining moments, those points in your life where the decision you make really matters. And it's not just in sport or in business, but it's also in your personal life as well. And that is where legal experts Owen and Mitchell come in. Whether you're planning for the future, whether you're going through a separation, you're thinking about inheritance tax, or maybe protecting your property and your legacy, they're complex, high-stakes moments. You've got to get them right, and you need lawyers who understand both the details and the bigger picture. Owen Mitchell's private client team offer a personalised service built around your needs, bringing clarity and confidence for when it matters most. And like all high performers, they start out by listening. Find out more at owenmitchell.com. That's owenmitchell.com.
You've spoken about trust being like that secret sauce.
Yeah.
When did you trust him, and what was it that made you trust him?
I mean, so if I look back now, I think he's been one of the best owners of Premier League football since Premier League was formed.
Yeah.
Okay. And why do I say that? Is three things really. When I first went to my first Premier League meeting, there was 18 owners and 2 CEOs. That was myself and Rick Parry from Liverpool. And because I was there as a PLC, I was speaking for the ownership group. And Rick was there speaking for the ownership group of Liverpool. So for all intents and purposes, there was 20 owners in the room. Right? If you go today, you're lucky if there's 5 or 3, right? So we ran it, right? He kept to his commitment that he wanted me in there to run it. Now that doesn't mean that we always agreed, because we didn't. But whatever we agreed on, we came out and executed. And that meant there was honesty, there was argument, for want of a better word. Because the requirement was to get Chelsea to be the best club in Europe. So that was one thing. Second thing is, it was like he put the money in, and then one of the things we talked about way up front was he convert that into equity so the club would not be in debt, because debt kills football clubs.
Right.
Yeah. He came to games. He was interested. He understood the temperature of the crowd. Right. Yeah. The reason he got involved in the first place was that first night he saw what this thing could be.
Yeah.
He fell in love with, we lost and everybody stood up and clapped because of the performance of a player or the team, right? It was so special. And I think that's what he dreamed of. And this relentless pursuit of excellence. And I think there's another thing. These guys that are as rich, and there's a lot of them these days, and a lot of those guys are coming into sport.
Yeah.
They can do anything they want every day of the week, right? Put your money into sport doesn't mean you're successful, right? So I think there's this challenge. There's excitement, because it's not straight line. If he put the money he put into Chelsea in one of his other investments, it'd just be a straight line return.
Yeah.
Because that's what it is. You can have the best team, it loses on a Saturday. As frustrating as that is, it happens with regularity.
Yeah, of course.
It doesn't happen over the season. The best team wins over the season. But on any given day, and I think the Premier League more than anything else, that's what keeps it the best league in the world.
Yeah. But then we're talking very much around your role is managing these these billionaires with huge egos. Now we've had people that from that period at Chelsea that would speak about Ancelotti's term, thunderbolt defeats, where Abramovich would struggle to countenance how Chelsea could get beat to Wigan, for example, and there'd be conversations with the head coach there.
Yeah.
Would you tell us about how you manage the ego of an owner in a situation like that?
Well, I think it started by in week one, and again, we had a plan. One of the plans was one of the key employees is the coach.
Yep.
Okay, he's the face of the club. It's not Roman. It's not me. He's the face of the club, and it was Claudio. Okay, and Claudio's super. But having worked with Ferguson's a winner, right? I don't care what he does. He's the winner. He went into racing, won. If he went into building, he'd be the best builder, right? That's what he is. So what Ferguson gave me is understanding what winning means, the character you need to be, the commitment, the relentless, achievement. You win, you go again. You might have a night off, you might have a beer, but next morning you're on to the next one. Yeah. Claudio was not that. Right. So, I started, saw him on the Wednesday. We spent time together. I was meeting Roman on the Thursday. One of the commitments was we were going to have a training ground. I mean, Chelsea in 2004, again, didn't have a full-time doctor, didn't have a training ground. Couldn't train on a Thursday because we used the university, right, playing fields, right? So he said, we'll have a commitment to go to training ground. So I think the Thursday we'd spent in a helicopter going round in a circle. From
Cobham?
Yeah. Well, we found Cobham. He thought that was too far. I said, it's not too far, right? We can't buy Regent's Park. We can't buy Hyde Park. So we had to buy, So I think it became Wimbledon or Cobham, right? Anyway, Cobham was it. So we did that. Friday we're having dinner. How's your week? I said, we've got to change Carlos. Not Carlos, we've got to change Ranieri, Claudio. And he said, what do you mean we've got to change Ranieri? So I said, he's not going to get us where we need to get to, right? Anyway, we then went on this incredible run, right? Gets the semi-final of the European Cup, Champions League, second in the league. And as this goes on through the season, it's like, what are we going to do with Claudio? I said, we're going to change him.
You never wavered in that
Never
belief?
wavered. And he said, well, what if we win the league? I said, we change him. What if we win the Champions League? We change him. And I think this sent him into a bit of a spin, if I'm being honest, because it was like the preeminent question. Like, have you changed your mind this week?
So Roman Abramovich is shocked by your ruthlessness.
Yeah, I think he just didn't equate to what was happening.
Right.
And I said, look, the bottom line is we could win, right? Next year we could get relegated. That's not what we're building here. You don't become the best club in Europe by winning and relegation. That's the reality. So it's a bigger long-term play. And I genuinely believe that. And the only reason I knew that was not that, again, Claudio was really good, but he wasn't at the level that I'd been used to.
Yep.
Right. Alex was my benchmark of what you need to win. Yeah?
Yep.
And he fell way short of that. And again, this is not against Claudio. Claudio was brilliant with the press.
Like, what were you seeing that was different with Claudio and Ferguson?
Decision making. And he got nicknamed Tinkerman.
Yeah.
The players, the clarity of messaging to players.
Right.
You could be the striker and you've scored a hat-trick. He'd still pick you up on the things that you didn't do.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, tangibly, players would come in and like, I'm in for it today, right? And you've won the game.
Right.
It's that attention to detail. It's that relentless pursuit of excellence.
Yeah.
Which Claudio just didn't have. And I thought, look, if we had some good players. And again, Ferguson said to me one day, which is brilliant, he said, look, you need to understand that until you've won, you don't know what it's like to win. But once you've won, you never want to lose. And I didn't really understand what that meant at United, right? I really understood what it meant at Chelsea.
Go on, expand.
And the reason for that is, if I looked at the team, I mean, we had an incredible team and didn't really win anything at Chelsea before 2004. We had the odd win there, the odd win there. But we had Cech, we had Terry, we had Lampard, right? We brought Drogba in. And so what I was looking for as a coach was somebody who got all that skill set that Ferguson had. So when you said, you know, what have you got in common? They were really they had a different style, right?
Yeah.
They're a different age group. They had a different coaching technique, completely different. But those two guys got on with each other because they're fundamentally wired the same.
What, Alex and Jose?
Alex and Jose, right? And that's what we needed to inject winning into the team. So I knew what I wanted. I didn't know what he was like. I knew it wasn't what we got.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the reality. And when we got Jose, from day one, in fact, I took him. England were in a camp, and I got special dispensation to get the Chelsea players out for half an hour to introduce them to Jose. And he made them all bigger than what they were.
Go on. How?
The way he talked about them, the way he talked to them, the way he was going to play them, the role they would play in building Chelsea to be a big European team. Right. I mean, you asked John Terry, Frank Lampard, Joe Cole, time. These guys physically grew. Okay? And at that point, I knew this guy we'd made the right decision. I mean, I knew it before, but just to see that reaction, like man management ability, in a different way than Alex, but the same characteristic, could get these guys walking through a wall, right? Utter belief. So that was one decision. And the second decision was, again, it was based around United. There is no way that we were going to have another 25-year manager. Right? Wenger. So Jose became the first one of the next breed. Right?
Yeah.
He was one of one when he came. And then, you know, Klopp followed and Pep followed and etc. But at that point, there was Ferguson and others in his wake, if I'm being honest. There was Arsene who'd done a great job. I mean, again, he changed the sport when he came in. And Jose came and changed the sport when he came in. And we decided that we're going to have a different format, because the format was, when you change manager, everything changed. And there was another 7 or 8 people come in, and it was another culture. And we said, what we're going to do, we're going to change the manager. So we're going to build a culture that remains. So everything outside of the coach and perhaps 1 or 2 assistants was the clubs, which was a real strategic direction. Because again, culture is the hardest thing to build. And the way that, you know, certainly the way that we didn't build it thinking that we'd have a manager a year. But the success, one of the big successes of Chelsea was 20 trophies in 19 years. The structure, people fitted the structure. Or didn't. And all that backroom, all that medical, all that analytics, all that academy piece was the clubs, and didn't disappear, and you had to start building again. So
what was how would you articulate the culture that you were looking to build?
Well, again, I think this winning culture, right? I mean, I think people didn't understand that 2 years before Jose joined us, he hadn't lost a game at home. He then went 2 years with us without losing a game at home. Nobody had done that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that goes back to the days where, you know, Liverpool was a fortress. You know, the badge walking out onto the pitch intimidated people, right? People came to us not thinking they could win. Yeah?
Yeah.
And why would you?
Would you see that in the tunnel?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, the psychology of nobody's beaten Chelsea in 3 years, 3.5 years, whatever, right? It's a factor. Our players were just bigger for it. They were just up for it. One of his skills was incredible. It was like chess, I think, is he understood the moves. So if they made a substitution, he'd make one pretty quickly to nullify that substitution.
Right.
He'd know how the others played. He'd know how they would substitute. He'd know how they would form. So his ability to look at his game, not only from his team, but the opposing team, was way in advance than anything I'd seen. And look, I think that became that delivers a certain type of football. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you haven't won anything and you start winning, people love it because they love winning. But I think there was a building, a sort of feeling then, this is not exciting.
Right, yeah.
Right? Because we'd won, because we got trophies, suddenly it's the way we play that becomes important, right? But, you know, Jose was, just like Ferguson was so critical to the success and building of what Manchester United was, Jose, what he did and the legacy he left lasted way longer than his tenure.
So how did it come to end?
I mean, it was. I think it was that, and again, Jose coined the phrase "the Holy Trinity," where it was easy. It was hard, but the decision making was easy. It was Roman, me, and him.
And how often would you guys get together?
Oh, regular. I mean, I'd see Jose every day. Roman, I'd see him around every game, right? Sometimes he'd go to training. So there was just this building of that we're all building this thing together to become what it needs to be, right? It's fantastic. Again, I think there was then certain dynamics. There was certain. So going back to first time I saw Roman, he knew nothing about football. 2 years in, he knew a lot. He started to know a lot about football, right? So started to have an opinion, right? An incredibly smart person. And again, I think he became the best ownership in Premier League football, and he became certainly the most knowledgeable, genuinely, right? Because he was interested in it. He watched it. He came to games when he wasn't there. He was watching it.
Okay,
right? He got really into it and interested. But as a consequence of that, then he started to have opinions, and he's the owner, so that's fine. And he's putting a lot of money in. And then these things started to creep in terms of, we win 1-0, we need, and then put a bus. Can we not? We should have won 3-0 because we're better, right? And those types of things in their own right, it's not an issue. That's fine, right? But you got Jose, best coach in the world at that time. We won the Premier League first time in 50 years in his first season.
Yep.
Never been, a special one. So again, it ended early, right? That's the reality. And it ended early, and it wasn't that he got fired. It was Jose came to me. We were doing a cinema launch. We'd got a film about Chelsea, and it was a night, the big reveal. So the whole team was coming out, and we met in the health club. And Jose said, "Pete, get me out of here, will you?"
But what would happen for him to ask that?
I think he would. Look at, if you look at Jose's tenure, it's not 10 years, is it?
Never is, yeah.
Right? So it's not all one way, this isn't. This is again. He's a builder. He's dynamic. He's got his own style, which is not easy.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's all great. But I think it was sort of coming to an end. Okay. And I think all of us, the three of us, all saw it.
But was there ever a meeting where you thought, I can see this starting to unravel here?
Yeah, I think that it didn't happen on that night. The event happened on that night. And Josie sort of said, Pete, can you get me out?
But tell us about the event that you thought.
I don't think there was one. There wasn't this, explosion. There wasn't this big argument that didn't implode. It was this gradual changing of the style that Roman wanted.
But when he's coming and saying, yeah, it was a good 1-0, but why wasn't it 3? How was Mourinho responding in that moment?
I think initially explanatory, and then as these things went on, saw it as confrontational. Right. What are you asking me that for? I've got 3 points. We're top of the league.
Yeah.
Right? And look, I mean, when he left, so that night, I said, do me a favour, go to the film premiere. I'll stay behind, meet me back here. And we sorted it that night. And Josie and I are really good friends. Him and Roman are very good friends, right? So what happened was, and it proved not to be a problem for Jose because he went on to do other things. Yep. And it proved to not be we went on to continue to win as Chelsea.
Sure.
So I think it run its course. And probably in other clubs it would have taken 4 years to run its course, or 5 years. It took a bit shorter. Because, again, it was a great environment. We created this environment of continual improvement.
Yep.
Right? The standards was always about beating them. It was about winning and then going again. And again, I come back to there's lots of similarities.
Yeah.
Great players, great organisation, people working harder, people working smarter, and just creating this environment of continual improvement.
So let's take those ingredients then and talk about your current role at Atlassian and Williams.
Yeah.
So you're on record as saying that this is going to be one of the biggest comebacks in sporting history.
Yeah, I think it is. And why do I believe that is, well, I think as an industry, F1 is on fire. It's quite interesting. So I look at this in two ways, really. One, if you look at any sports team, it's got a cost base. In football, it's 24 players or 30 players. And in F1, it's 2 cars and 2 drivers, right? And the business has to produce more revenue than cost, because then it becomes a proper business and becomes valuable. So the industry themselves, football, Premier League, and F1 are both industries that are really strong in terms of its appeal from an audience point of view. The difference between F1 is it's a truly global sport. You go to Singapore, you go to China, you go to America. In football, people come to you.
Yeah.
Right? So football's global from an audience point of view and people watching. F1's people watching but participating, right? And one of the big recent successes is Netflix. And what Netflix did is show the world, in particular the young fans that weren't fans before, but post Netflix or now, the excitement of F1, the personalities in F1, the competition between teams in F1 is intense. Right, it's like no other sport. So the trajectory of the sport is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When you go, it's like someone said, it's like 24 Super Bowls, right? And it is.
Yeah.
So when you go to town for 4 days, it's the hottest ticket in town. Whether that's government, whether that's business, whether that's entertainment, whether that's other sports, people want to be there. They want to be seen there. So it offers things that other sports doesn't. And then the experience of being there, where you literally sat where the players are having lunch, i.e. the drivers, or you're in the garage, which is like being in the changing room as the team are running out. It's the experience you can give is just phenomenal. Now, to be a good business, there's limited ways of getting the revenue. One is performance of the team.
Yeah.
Participation, and then where you finish in the table, and then the other one is commercial. And if rev becomes greater than cost, it starts to look like a good business. The advantage of Williams is its brand, right? It's 50 years next year.
Yep.
It's the third longest team. There's been over 150 teams in F1 since it started, and we're one of 3 who's been in 50 years or longer. So it's got this unbelievable heritage. It's got this value. It's an independent race team, right? So we're not selling drinks or cars or any other things. It's independent, and the values attributed to Williams, which are critically important to commercial partners, are the ones that Frank Williams built.
Yeah.
Right. And we were a multiple world champion. So we got this great heritage of winning. We got this wonderful values that the Williams family built in terms of trust and honesty and openness. And then, you've got the sport that's on fire.
Yeah.
There's no relegation. So compared to my world, it's easy. Right? You come last, you get kicked out. In here, you finish up 10th, but you're still there, right? So the structure of the sport is good. And this, again, this all comes back to the quality of the ownership. So I knew the ownership group before they bought this. Really good people. Really, they've got the money and resources to put in which is needed in sport, right?
Yeah.
Most sports purchasers buy it and haven't got enough money to run it.
Yeah.
Right? It's number one failure. These guys are in it to take it right the way back to the top. They've got the resources to do that. And then the component that was missing was people. And we've invested really heavily in the right people to get us back to the top.
So you had that conversation with Abramovich that told you I want to be number one in Europe. Yeah. And you're telling him it's time and patience.
Yeah.
It's time and money that are your biggest barriers to that. When you spoke to the ownership, what were they telling you their aspirations are for Williams?
Yeah, so first of all, when they bought it, they told me, and I said, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And the reason it was interesting is they're very private, they're very professional, and it's like, sport's an interesting market, interesting product when your overall, what you are is not that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not an ego play. It's a business play, really professional, smart people from tech, smart people from engineering, and see the value. And I spoke to them and basically said, look, I don't think it's working like you plan, right? And they've from day one always put the maximum amount of money in that they can because, we're all cost capped.
Yeah.
But they clearly hadn't got the people right. And, so I looked at it and I said, look, I think, you've got some of the wrong people. And that's again where you lean into people make the difference.
Yeah.
Right. So bringing, and unfortunately you have to move people out to bring people in.
Yeah.
But bringing James Vowles in, who represents, right, again, the face.
Yeah.
Yeah. A different generation of TP. Yeah. And understands the sport. There's Toto's number 2.
Yeah.
Experience winning at the highest level, multiple world championships. And him being the face of recruiting a lot of other people who are great at what they do, not just from F1, but from other industries to complement it, because it's skill sets.
Yeah.
Is what will allow us to win races in 28. And it's a long-term play, right? Again, it was understanding that this isn't an overnight play.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think football, you know, if it all goes bad in football, I can spend a lot of money and change the team.
Yeah.
You don't do that in building 2 world-class racing cars.
Yeah.
So it is about processes, and it is about procedures, and it is about getting a leap up in tech, which we believe is one of the advantages how we'll get back to a leader. And then fundamentally having the right people. And that's what we've been doing in the last 2.5, 3 years. And it's that will get us on track. It's not about, do we win this season?
Yep.
Do we win this race? You know, sport kicks you. You can't say, you know, we're the best team, but you can still lose.
Yeah.
That's what sport does for you, okay? That's why people keep coming back to it. That's why live sport, there's no substitute for it. So what we're building is a next world champion, will be a multiple world champion. There's a period where that will happen. We've invested the maximum in money, getting the right people, and it's that confidence and we've got this wonderful heritage brand.
Yep.
Which, you know, there's 800 million fans in F1. There's 400 million that like Williams, either as a first team or as a second team, because it represents all the good things about the sport.
But you've been around winners. You said Ferguson, you knew he was a winner. Mourinho, you knew he was a winner. Was there a moment with James Vowles where you came to that same conclusion?
Yeah, I think so. James is a very, very different character than Mourinho, right?
Sure.
But he articulates, I think. He's been on...
we've had him on,
right?
yeah.
He articulates what is needed, how transformation is important to him, how people are important to him, how you're changing the culture, not just the machine. Yeah?
But was there a particular moment where you've seen him in action and thought, this guy's got it?
I see him in action every day. I mean, I work with him as part of the executive management group. Yep. And I think his experience as Mercedes is invaluable.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, look, the reality is number 2s don't always make good number 1s, right? He's a good number 1. And again, those characteristics, he is a winner. He understands what's needed to win. He understands that, you know, it is not just about building the right procedures and machines. It is about getting the right people and then getting those people collaborating to become a team. And that's what takes the time. That's what really takes the time. And I think the reason we'll be successful is our ownership group, our management team are all on the same page.
Yeah.
It's not the owners thinking we can do it in 2 years and the management group sort of saying, yes, we can, building to delay. It's like, no, we can't, right? We're on a trajectory to win races in 28, to contend for world championship in 30, right? That is, 8 years after the investors, no, longer, probably 10 years. That's that understanding of what's needed. Now, everybody wants to do it quicker than that. And if you can do that, that's great. But the great thing about the business, it doesn't do short-term patches that impacts the long-term objective. That's really smart. And that ultimately comes from the ownership, because they want to do the right thing that allows Williams to not win it once, but become a multiple world champion, just like it did under Frank.
Well, if there's anyone that knows anything about how do you win and then keep winning, I can't think of a better man than yourself, Pete.
Thank you very much.
To be there.
Because you're on it every day. And there is this constant improvement, right? It's not, you never finish a day and think that's it. You know, it's that constant. But I think we're building a really solid team. We're building a really solid team across all departments. And and James leading that, I think we've got the right man to do it.
Brilliant. Well, Pete, thank you so much for giving us your time and your insights and so much wisdom. It's been honestly a real pleasure to get to sit with you. I've loved it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.